Trauma is when our system gets flooded with thoughts, experiences, emotions, images that were too big for our young, vulnerable selves to understand.
What people don't understand is that what is perceived as quote unquote traumatic, we don't even have to call it trauma, right? It's just that you didn't feel in that moment that you could show up in all of you.
Tell me who you are from the inside out. What is your I am? What is your affirmation as you know yourself to be? And I like to go in there, like you said, reinstall the software, like go in there. And I wrote down what you said, install the cheerleader.
Welcome back, everybody, to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and I have brought back Lisa Pepper Satkin for an episode 2. So excited to have her on. If you didn't catch my first episode with Lisa, all you have to do is go to the show notes. The link will be right there. You can go back to our first episode in which we started talking about the difference between psychotherapy, licensed social workers, licensed therapists, and people who coach. And Lisa does a fusion of both. So that was a really great conversation that you're going to want to catch. I want to hear from Lisa as a licensed therapist, her understanding of how trauma plays into people not having an understanding of who they are, or people feeling disconnected from self. Because I know I see that a lot in my practice, that a big part of what people are challenged with is they don't know who they are, and they're not in alignment with who they are. And they want to kind of get home to that, and they don't know why they're not home to that. And they want to understand that backstory and then be able to basically get home and start living their lives from the place that they want to be living it from. So Lisa, I really want to start with, as a therapist, as a psychotherapist that's licensed, what is your feeling about the impact of adverse experience or lived experiences that are perceived as traumatic in people's lives? Like, what is trauma to you?
I'm going to go a number of directions here. Okay, so here's how I define trauma. Trauma is when our system gets flooded with thoughts, experiences, emotions, images that were too big for our young, vulnerable selves to understand or digest or access solutions for. So what we did to self-regulate, to make ourselves feel okay, are the habits and patterns that sometimes come up today that are actually no longer needed because we're here to take care of that younger version of ourselves. So addiction is a lot about, well, an aspect of it is about the way that habits people have turned to regulate the dysregulation. Now, when someone's out partying really hard, they're not like, whoa, I'm going to regulate my dysregulation. It's like, whoa, I'm having fun, right? Because it looks like fun and feels like fun. Except when you start to really tune into yourself, you can feel how it's just a little bit off. And that's your true self. When you have the courage and the knowledge and the ability to listen to your authentic self, your truth. I'm trying to be really careful in how I talk because I know this, it's just all I've ever known. It's the only way I think. I've done this work since I was 10. I even, taught my friends in the 3rd grade how to tune into their feelings. I so it's my language. I want to make sure it doesn't sound, preachy, like it has to be this way. It's just been an effective way that I've had an empowered life. Has it been easy? No. Is it without struggle? No. Do I do work on myself constantly? Yes. Why? Because I'm always wanting to get to that inner wisdom.
Mm-hmm. So I love the way, first of all, that you described it. I think it's brilliant. And, you mentioned something about the authentic self. And I know for me, a lot of the people that I work with, this is why they're coming to me. They feel so disconnected from self. They don't have access to that part of them. It's
Okay.
either
Can
been,
I ask you
yeah,
a question? If they're disconnected from self, how do they know they're disconnected from self?
I think that they can feel that they're not living authentically. They're
Exactly.
showing up in ways that they'd prefer not to, like not being able to say no, finding themselves people pleasing all the time, having everything to have to look perfect all the time. And what I'll say is, they'll say to me, it's exhausting. There's got to be a better way. This can't be it's not sustainable. And I don't think this is really what I want. I don't know how to show up otherwise because I'm so afraid if I show up in this other way, which I know is more of myself, I'm going to be rejected, abandoned, won't be liked, won't be seen as
Or I may
valuable.
be, right? I may be. These things
Right.
may happen. And they
Right.
believe the inner fear, which is it will happen.
Yeah.
And we guide people to it may, but it also may not.
Right. Well, the way I do it is I help them go back and find out. And to your point, you were talking about habits and behaviors. Where did that behavior start? Because we're not born that way, right? We're not born people pleasing, lack of boundary setting, deprioritizing our needs, souls. When we're born and our diaper's dirty, we will be sure to let you know our diaper's dirty. And we will cry and we will scream and we will have a fit until our need is met. And we prioritize,
That's a good
right? We
point.
prioritize ourselves. When we're done sleeping, we will let you know. When we're a little bit older and we're sitting in a high chair and we don't want what you put on our tray, we'll throw it off. When we're starting to crawl and we fall, because we
Yeah.
will, we get right back up. There's no part of us that looks around and goes, oh my God, I just failed. Or did people see that? No, they're going to think I'm not going to be a good crawler. No, we don't ever have those inner thoughts. We don't have that inner critic yet. We have complete confidence. We have complete courage. We're very clear on what we want. We care about ourselves. We're very self-compassionate. We are very creative in finding solutions to what we want. We're very centered in self, right? And a lot of the things that I just described, those qualities are kind of what I see as like this self-leadership. We're self-led. But over time, for a variety of reasons and a variety of experiences, we become less confident, less courageous, less vocal. We start to deprioritize ourselves. And so what I do is I try to help people go back and see how and when and why did that new behavior show up? Was it relevant then? Probably. But is it relevant now? Not so much. Right? So we can reframe it and kind of recreate the narrative of whatever the original story was. This is what you chose with what you knew and what you had at that time. But it's 50 years later, or 40 years later, or 20 years later, it's likely not relevant anymore. And this is where you're stuck because it's not going to get you to where you want to be. So when you see people at the beginning of their stages and they're disconnected from self, what do you see? How do you know that they're disconnected from self?
So that's interesting because usually people who are coming to work with me now have already done a big body of work. But I'll tell you an interesting story. So I was texting with a new client, a young man who had heard from a friend that he had done some work with me and he noticed some changes and so he reached out. And it was just in the actual text exchange. There was a lot of like, well, what's good for you? Or when can you meet? Or is this, like, I just noticed all this sort of not self-focused, but more taking care of me. And I said in the text, I said, well, it's obvious to me you get to start doing some work on taking up space for yourself. Literally, that was what my text said. And when I talked to him, I found out he was a triplet.
Oh, yeah.
And there it is. Like somatically, and soma is the body. So somatically is the body-centered wisdom, is like, here he is from the time he was in utero. He didn't take up a lot of space.
That's right.
And it was so clear to me that he was the baby of the three. It's like, it just, this stuff is not rocket science when you have a body of knowledge.
Yeah. And I mean, as soon as you said he was a triplet, my response was like, there it is, and again, like, what people don't understand is that what is perceived as quote unquote traumatic, we don't even have to call it trauma, right? It's just that you didn't feel in that moment that you could show up in all of you, in all of your lightness and glory and joy and shine for whatever reason. So you kind of outshined, right? You kind of, or dimmed out that light, I should say, which I hear a lot. But it hinders your life in a way. At some point you say, all right, I want different, right? And this guy is saying to you, I see different in my friend. I want access to that different. What I always try to remind people is you have it. It's deep within. It's just a little quiet. We just got to reinstall it. We got to give it a bigger voice, right? A lot of people have that. It's like never gone. It's just kind of in the quiet corner and it's ready to come out. And sometimes that inner critic, that inner chatter, what I love to call the itty bitty shitty committee, is so loud. It's about having that dialogue with this committee and this inner chatter and saying, it's time for me now. I want to come forward. And how can we harmoniously be in this space together?
Totally.
Right? Where I don't have to be over in the corner and so shy anymore.
Lovely. I want to work with you.
I love it. I do have a hypnosis recording I call Install the Inner Cheerleader, Quiet the Inner Critic. And it's so great because it has all this visualization of, really installing. And in that hypnosis recording, I do talk about when you wanted your diaper changed, you had a voice. When you were crawling, you had a voice. When you were in your high chair, you had a voice. I try to give them this visualization because we all had it. We've all had that voice. Nobody's born without the voice. Though, to your point, you can have experiences in utero, especially if you're one of many, where maybe you're going to come out a little bit quieter, actually. But at one point, I actually have the person visualize that the inner critic was so big at one point, but now it's so small. They can place it on the thumb of their finger. And sometimes if I'm doing this in person for the first time and the person really is in a hypnosis state, I see them pick their finger up in front of them and I watch them place this little inner critic on it. And I just say to them, and at any time that voice was so loud, but now it's eeny and puny. It's a whisper. You can barely hear what it's going to say. And whenever you want, you can just flick it off. You can just say, not now. I'm here. I have a voice. I have a choice of using that voice. I'm ready to show up in the world as me,
Mm.
right? Stop trying to hold me back. You don't need to protect me anymore. So I love giving, we know rules of the mind. One of the greatest rules of the mind is the mind loves to work with pictures. So the more that you can help them visualize what it is that they do want, they can create that image, and then it's kind of with them all the time. They can't unsee it once they see it.
Mm. You're so good.
So getting back to self-awareness, what do you think hinders people's access to self?
Well, we've been talking about it. I think I wouldn't use that language, what hinders people access to self, because since we're in this conversation, that's sort of like advanced language, right? But where it's like, what hinders people from flourishing? And I just met this really great man the other night, and he's doing this whole conference on compassion and people flourishing. And I told him, I said, I designed a program to help kids grow self-esteem. But I like this word flourish better. I'm really wordsmithing everything right now because flourish is understood across the board. Self-esteem, some people don't know about. But I watched in my kids' school, in my kids' classrooms, when I asked kids, tell me who you are from the inside out. What is your I am? What is your affirmation as you know yourself to be? I tell you, those kids still to this day, I see them, I know their I ams. And that is alive and well in them. So it's that conversation. How do we ignite in people that inner wisdom that got buried because of trauma, because of addiction, because of comparison, because of grief, because of loss?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to go in there, like you said, reinstall the software, like go in there. And I wrote down what you said, install the cheerleader. Because I watched all these kids. I was installing a cheerleader. I would walk into the classroom and these kids would light up. And I would ask every single one of them, what is your I am? And I would make them stand up in front of the classroom and say, I am creative. And I made them lift their arms up. And this was this whole program I developed. And I know I'm onto something because it makes kids flourish. So if we're waiting until someone comes to us when they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, it's because their I am got buried.
Amen to that. And you know what I was just thinking is, think of the child who at home is young, let's say 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, and with complete courage says, I am awesome. I am amazing, mom. I am smart. I am creative. I'm kind. And they're saying all these things, but they're talking to a parent who hasn't done their own work. And they say, who do you think you are to talk about yourself that way?
That's right.
How dare you? Right. So and now all of a sudden it gets real quiet, right? Because we want that connection with our parent. We don't want to threaten that. But what I love what you were doing is you were creating, there may have been a kid in that classroom that you were doing this I am exercise with who maybe have had something like that at home. But you were creating not only a safe and secure environment for them to actually express what it is that they do know about themselves, but also create an environment among their peers who were going to cheer that on and say, yes, you are. Because that may be the only place that that kid gets this. Right? And so I love that you were doing that. How long ago did you start that program? It's so
So
brilliant.
it's called My Hardy Kid, and people can find more about it at myhardykid.com. And I started it 10 years ago. And,
Wow.
I laugh because I said to somebody, it's not a nonprofit organization. It was no profit because I would give it away because I loved it so much. I gave it all away. And so it'll come back though. I'm excited to somehow see that dream really come true where there's clubs in every single school in the world, like worldwide. Because with that, when we have that, when we start to plant those seeds in people instead of like parallelograms, come on, like a vault.
Well, listen, yeah, I agree. And there's a huge gap and void in schools. I'll use public school as an example because I think the private schools maybe sometimes get it a little bit better because they have more flexibility. But in the
We
private
shouldn't
schools,
even go into the schools because that's like a whole other podcast.
well, I
We'll do
agree.
that next time because it's too big to take
Yeah.
on right now.
Yeah.
Like we could have a monthly meeting of
I think we should.
Meeting of the minds. I've loved being here. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I've loved having you here. And, as I've mentioned to you in the background, I am developing for 2024 these expert series. When I started this podcast in 2020, and it's had many different names over the years, but all the same vibe and the same content. It really started with storytelling. And I still do the storytelling where people can come in and talk about, kind of a fall to a rise kind of story. I had this experience and this is how it hindered me. And this is what I harnessed within. And this is what I learned about myself. And this is how somebody else can kind of get through a similar situation. But as I've developed this podcast, this is its 4th year. What I'm really loving, and I think the audience is too, is bringing in experts in this area for people who either A, are not ready to go into any kind of formal support or formal help. Maybe they don't have the funds yet, or maybe they're just curious and on their own self-development journey, where I'm doing not just an expert series with somebody like you who is a licensed psychotherapist, but I'm bringing in ADHD experts and doing a vertical on just ADHD. I've got a number of different trauma therapists that I'm doing this with. I even now have a series, you guys have to listen to this, with Lily Bewley. She's a dating expert, but she does it through internal family systems and parts work, which I love. It's so brilliant. Right.
I
So
can't wait. We have so much to do together.
Yeah. So definitely I will have you back on. We'll get you into this expert series. For people that are new to the podcast, welcome. You can go to wherever you get your podcasts, but for sure Apple, for sure Spotify. All of these podcasts are always also video casted and can be found on YouTube. But I highly recommend that you subscribe because I literally drop a new podcast every single Monday and there's just such good content, if I do say so myself.
You're the best. I can't wait till we flip that mic.
Oh, it's good. Yeah. And that's the thing. Lisa and I had a little side chat. We're going to flip the mic and she's going to interview me
I can't wait.
One of the episodes. So that's going to be fun. That's going to be phenomenal. Right. So guys, again, it's Lisa Pepper Satkin. You're going to see more of her. This is episode number 2 with her. You got to tune in. You're going to learn something. It's going to help you shift, evolve, transform. That's always the goal of these.
And I'm available to talk to people. I'm available to talk to your listeners, your viewers.
That's right. And that's going to be at lisapeppersatkin.com. She's Lisa Pepper Satkin on all the social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And go and find her. Fill out the form on her website. She loves to have a consultation with people. She loves to have a chat with people. And of course, all of those links will be in the show notes. Lisa, as always, thank you so much for joining us.